Good afternoon. I'm Lucie Lapovsky, Chair of the National Council for Research on Women, and I want to thank you all for joining us this afternoon for this webinar to introduce Áine Duggan, our new president, to you. First, I want to thank the Girl Scouts for hosting us and helping us with this technology. We hope that even though you all can't be here with us, which actually you're quite lucky because it's raining and snowing here in New York, but we hope this is a close second to being with us, to seeing us on the webcam. I would like to tell you a bit about the search process and how we went about moving forward to finding a successor to Linda Basch, who has been our president for 16 years. The board had 3 facilitated meetings where we talked about what we wanted in our next president. And out of those meetings, we concluded that the major characteristics that we wanted in a new president was someone who was passionate about women and girls, someone who could connect policy with research and action, and someone who could work collaboratively with multiple constituencies, and finally, a proven fundraiser. The board appointed a search committee of 6 members, of 6 board members, and I chaired the search committee. We conducted a national search, and we received more than 70 applications from around the country. We conducted interviews both by phone and then in person. The search committee conducted interviews with several of our finalists. After the search committees conduct interviews with the finalists, we then moved on 4 of those people, and they were interviewed by the staff and many of our constituent groups, some member centers, some members of our corporate circle, and members of our president's circle, all interviewed our finalists. And after the feedback from those interviews, we forwarded 2 finalists to our Board of Trustees. And out of that, the board unanimously selected Áine to be our next president. Since her selection about 2 months ago, we have been involved in a transition process where Linda and Áine have been working together. Linda has been working to transfer many of our relationships and introduce Áine to many of our close friends. If she hasn't gotten to you, don't be insulted. It's just a very hard task to get to meet everyone quickly. And Áine has been learning tremendous amounts of what the council does. We are multifaceted and involved in many, many different things. So Áine has been on a very swift learning curve. So what I would like to do now is introduce Linda to you, our President Emerita, and have her talk to you about several of the accomplishments of the council over her 16 years as our president. Linda?
Thank you, Lucie. Hello, everyone. I would like to welcome you also, and please excuse my terrible cold. The theme of what I will talk about with all of you is looking back in order to look forward. When I came to the council in 1996, it was a very exciting moment. We were just coming off the Beijing World Conference for Women, where thousands of women gathered from around the world to craft the Beijing Platform for Action with their 12 critical points. Hillary Clinton came and electrified us all by talking about women's rights or human rights, and we need a global village to change the world. I was actually in the room. I was hugely optimistic about the future for women and girls, as were many people at that time. Now, while there has been movement in the 16 years in some areas, harsher times, as we all know now, looking back, were just around the corner. And these harsher times are revealed in some key statistics, and I'm not going to bore you with a lot of stats, but just to give you a bit of a flavor of where we haven't moved. In 1996, women were 42% of the labor force. They're almost 50% of the labor force now. But despite their prevalence in the labor force, they were only 10% of Fortune 500 board members in 1996, and today they're only 16%, so that's a 6% movement. In 1996, they were 0.2% of Fortune 500 CEOs. That number is almost 4% today. And they were earning 40% of the doctoral degrees in 1996. Today, they're earning 52% of those doctoral degrees. Most disturbing, though, has been the increase of women living below the poverty line. And that has increased from 15% in 1996 to almost 17% today. In other words, we have the highest rate of women living in poverty today in 43 years. Perhaps most positive of what happened over the past 16 years has been the recognition of the positive role that women have to play in their families, their communities, in the economy, and in society. But that has not been recognized in terms of moving into leadership positions or decision-making positions with any power. So, going back to 1996, I was really very excited to come to the Council and to act on its long-term goal, as I understood it, working to shape critical debate and policy change through research, advocacy, and collaboration in order to expand rights and opportunities for women and girls. I was recently on a panel where someone said, oh yes, your acronym is CAR, Collaboration, Advocacy, and Research, and in a way that's an interesting way to think about it. These goals have always been my guideposts. And I would also say we've been very keen to challenge the status quo and challenge assumptions. So how did we do this work? Well, I need to say from the beginning that I was always able to work very closely with our board, our staff, and our constituent circles of member centers, our corporate circle, and our president circle of college and university leaders. Their input has been critical throughout, and Áine, they will be certainly strong supports for you as well, I know that. So in terms of collaboration, we built and diversified the movement. We really took Hillary Clinton seriously. We knew we needed a village of diverse stakeholders. Now, when I came to the Council, we already had 77 member centers. That number over the 16 years has gone up to over 100 member centers. We've also tried to diversify the membership. As soon as we began to recognize ethnically diverse and racially diverse centers and leaders, we tried to actively recruit them into our network. We also added women's funds to our network. We built a corporate circle of more than 30 Fortune 500 companies, and we built a president's circle of several university and college leaders, all committed to the same goals that we were, advancing rights and opportunities for women and girls. So, let me tell you some of the things that we did together. We grew the Council as a thought leader and respected convener, and we always took on tough issues, particularly areas where women were not present, in the sciences, in the corporate arena, in the financial sector. We also worked with member centers to catalyze thinking in new areas. For example, on human security, we brought this concept from the UN to our broad network and engaged thinkers throughout the network on this. We were able to develop a wonderful seminar series with our partner member center at CUNY, City University of New York, and also with several partners from the UN, and we brought 10 fellows from different parts of the world to work with us on this. This was a project that lasted over 3 years. We also took on issues like religion in the workplace, sexuality in the workplace, diversity and inclusion in higher education and the corporate arena. And more recently, although I shouldn't say more recently because we've been focusing on economic security for a while, but we hosted a summit at the Ford Foundation focused on how to bring a collective impact approach to economic security and work with diverse stakeholders. We also have had annual conferences for between 200 and 250 people where we've focused on strategies for changing the landscape for women and girls and reframing debates. And working together, we produced widely disseminated, cutting-edge, solutions-oriented reports and think pieces. For example, Balancing the Equation, Where Are Women and Girls in Math, Science, and Engineering? One of the most exciting reports we did was Missing Information on Women and Girls, which we did as long ago as 2004. But there, we were looking at some of the negative spin that was being put on women, some of the pushback. There were actually pieces on the National Cancer Institute website linking breast cancer to abortion, we had to stand up and speak to those issues. And there are also a number of committees within the government, a number of committees focused on women and girls were being dismantled. And all of that came out in that missing report. We've also focused on taxes are a women's issue, reframing the debate. We looked at women in fund management and how that could be a roadmap to creating a critical mass of women in leadership positions. And most recently, we finished research on women of color. We've called it the challenge and the charge, how to advance and retain women in leadership positions. And although the focus there has been in the corporate arena, I think that you will agree with me that the findings apply to many arenas. So in addition to that work, we've also worked on developing forward-looking programs aimed at grooming future generations of women leaders and building the pipeline. We have a very exciting project now, building the pipeline for future leaders in the nonprofit arena. We've had programs focused on emerging leaders in the corporate arena and the nonprofit arena as well. And most important as well, we have fiscally stabilized the council, and for sure that's something that's come about from all of us working together and from many of you in the audience helping us in this area. We thank you all. So what are some of the critical issues as I see now? For sure, the absence of women in leadership positions and critical fields, which I hope we will continue to work on, and the continuing economic insecurity that women face and finding solutions to those challenges. Another area is working more internationally. But for sure, we have accomplished a great deal together. Again, our board, our staff, our member center circle, our corporate circle, our president's circle. And this is a really ideal time to rethink where we're going, our direction, and to go through a strategic planning process. And for this, I'm delighted to be passing the baton to my successor, Áine Duggan, who is coming to us and has just started working with us on November 15th. Áine is steeped in the issues we care about, but I think what's particularly exciting is that she's coming from another corner of the social justice arena, which means she has fresh perspectives to bring to us. And she also has some very interesting corporate connections that she's developed through this work. I've had the opportunity to have several meetings with Áine lately, and I am frankly totally excited about her joining us. So Áine, without further ado, I hope you'll say some things about your goals and perspective going forward.
Let me add one thing before Áine starts. I forgot to remind all of you that we would welcome your questions. On the bottom of your screen, there's instructions to send us questions, and after Áine finishes talking, we will be happy to answer as many questions as we can get to you this afternoon.
Thank you, Lucie, and thank you, Linda. It's a delight to be here this afternoon to meet all of you over the webcam, and I'm really looking forward to getting out and meeting as many of you as possible in person. I think it's really important that we spend some one-on-one time together so that I can hear about sort of your relationship with the Council and what you're looking forward to in the sort of weeks and months ahead as we go through the planning process. You know, as Linda pointed out, the Council has already developed an enormous foundation of work, and there is great opportunity for us to build on that foundation. We will certainly be keeping economic security for women at the center of our work, as well as building leadership across all sectors for women. And in fact, all of us at the Council really believe that those two issues are deeply connected, because when you build leadership opportunities for women, you're automatically creating economic security for all women. So doing some of that work and providing the research for everybody is a core part of what we do. Let me tell you a little bit about my background and where I've come from. As Linda mentioned, you know, I have enormous experience in the social justice arena. I've spent the last almost 20 years working, if you will, on issues that result from lack of women's leadership. And I would say that some of the numbers that I've seen in the work that I've done have been the inverse of the numbers that we see represented in leadership positions in government, in business, and in the community. So when we see that, you know, 20% at best is the representation of women leaders at the government level or at the business level. If you go to a food pantry line today, tomorrow, or the next day, you'll notice that the vast majority of people on that line are women. And the numbers of women who are, as Linda pointed out, falling into the grasp of poverty has been increasing in the last few years. So I think that there's some work for us to do in terms of reversing that equation and making sure that more of us are represented in positions of opportunity, but also in decision-making roles. So part of my vision as I move ahead with the Council is to bring my expertise into the women's arena so that we can begin to address women who have been left in the margins, bring them into positions of opportunity, and then work on leadership so that it is a more balanced world for all of us. And I really believe that we achieve a balanced world by having balanced representation. You know, you have to think about the fact that women make up more than 50% of the population. So I suppose one goal moving ahead is that our representation in decision-making positions is equal to our representation or our segment of the entire population of the country and of the globe. Some of the work that we'll be involved in is about working across multiple sectors. So one of the reasons why I like research and why I particularly was drawn to the Council and the Council's mission is because I really see research as being the cornerstone upon which everybody else can build. Now, I've had a lot of examples of how this has been very successful, and just to sort of pick one from my recent past, you know, it used to be that people thought of homelessness as an issue that was about men, particularly men living on the street. And data showed us that that wasn't actually the picture of homelessness at all, that the sort of, you know, real picture of homelessness was women with young children, and particularly, you know, women who were on their own, head of households, raising children. And when the data was able to show us that picture, a number of things happened. We were able to look at public policy in a different way. We were able to look at social services in a different way. We were able to think about solutions in a different way, so that we were trying to create housing opportunities for women with families. We were looking at workforce development so that it was addressing the needs of women who had experienced homelessness. And we were looking at issues like children going to school. If children are living in a homeless shelter, how do they access school? So that's just one example of how just one piece of data can spiral into all sorts of differences and changes in programmatic work and policy work, and indeed in work arenas itself. So that type of spiraling and connecting is some of the work that we will be doing at the Council. I think that being able to connect the different sectors with each other is vitally important. So we'll be continuing the role of aggregating data from our member centres and then working with the corporate partners, working with the community partners, and making sure that they have access to all of that data. But by the same token, and I think this piece is crucial, by the same token, we want to make sure that there's a flow of information in the other direction. So part of my vision moving forward is that we're going to be meeting with everybody and doing a lot of work around surveys and connecting different sectors together so that information is flowing back from the corporate arena, flowing back from the corporate groups to inform the development of new research. And I think in that way, the Council becomes a nexus of information and sort of accommodates the multi-directional flow of traffic and information that will allow us to come at solutions together. Now, Linda mentioned collaboration and collective impact work. Again, I think that's vital for the Council moving forward. But I would say this about collective action and collective impact work. For us, it's not a project. It's just a way of being, because everything that we do relies on our partners, whether it's our partners in the corporate arena, our partners in government, our partners in the community, or indeed our partners in the member centres. There isn't any work that the Council can do on its own. And so collaboration is a methodology for us, and it is at the core of all of our project work and will be going forward. So that's one of the reasons why I'm looking forward to getting out on the road and meeting all of you. I really believe that as I start off, that a listening tour and hearing what you're doing in the member centres, hearing what you're doing in the corporate arena, hearing what's happening at the community level, understanding what's important to you is a good way to start off, and it's a good way to begin strategic planning. Now, I will say that after a week, you've already given me much fodder because even in a couple of meetings with various different constituents, a number of issues have come up. We've had constituents tell us that they're interested in issues like veterans in the workplace or LGBTQ issues in the workplace. And there's also been this sort of pressing question about women's leadership, not in terms of creating opportunities for women's leadership, but the question about what does women's leadership mean and why does it matter? Now, some of these philosophical issues are going to be the issues that we have multiple opinions on, and I don't suspect that we will achieve agreement on many of the answers. But I think the fact that we're at the point that we're able to ask these questions, pose these questions, and we're willing to debate with each other about the answers means that we've reached a really important point in the movement. We've reached a point where we want to define what it means to be a leader. We want to define what it means for women to achieve equality. And I think that we're looking at it in terms of what is our responsibility once we become leaders. I don't think that the Council's job is to answer that question alone. But I do think the Council's job is to facilitate us in answering that question and helping everybody navigate it and sort of narrate the story as we develop more and more leadership opportunities. So that's another question and another sort of issue that we'll be working with everybody on in the coming weeks and months. What you can expect to see over the next few weeks is we're going to schedule a number of visits around the country. Our hope is to do visits in different pockets of the country with individuals, but also with groups. We will be meeting with the member centres to understand what research is happening right now and also what some of the obstacles are and resources that are needed to continue the research. And then we also want to develop some opportunities for some of our partners and some of our member centres to meet together so that there can be this beginning of the flow of information back and forth. And as we schedule those meetings, we'll be reaching out to all of you to make sure that you get involved. So that's what you can expect in the weeks and months ahead. That will feed right into our strategic planning. And to start us off, to give you, if you will, a bit of a teaser, I'm going to run through, or really Shama is going to run through a poll with you to let you see some of the issues that have come up in just a handful of meetings with corporate partners and member centres in the last week. And it would be really interesting for us to see what other people on the call are experiencing, are these issues that you're interested in. And you can expect, as I say, to see more of this as we move ahead. And we look forward to hearing your thoughts on the matter. So, Shama.
Thank you very much, Áine. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Shama Venkateshwar. I'm the Director of Research and Policy at the National Council for Research on Women. We have a couple of polls here to just gauge your current areas of work and also your interest. As Áine mentioned, these are areas that you have expressed interest in. If you could actually check some of these issues, we have a few areas that we've indicated here, definitely reflecting the Council's interest as well as what we've been hearing from you all as well. We're just going to take a couple of seconds to hear from you all. If you could do that, that would be wonderful. Again, this goes into part of our own thinking on how to present some of our ideas. I think we can publish the results now to just see how people fared on this. Thank you very much. We see a lot of folks working in other areas. We also see quite a bit of folks working on economic security, so thank you for that. Next poll, please. We also have a poll here on looking at areas that would be relevant to your own work. It's the same sorts of issues. Again, this is an area that we would be very interested in to know what you are all working on and interested in collaborating partners in. So if you could all take a minute to answer these questions. Again, this would be very useful for us. Clearly, the impact of women's leadership has a lot of place here, and we also see education and training for young girls as a as an area for potential collaborations. Thank you for this, and I now want to turn back to Lucie Lapovsky to take questions from you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for answering our polls. Thank you very much for answering our polls, and we will, the council and the staff there will look at the information you gave us, and it will help guide them in what they're doing. First, let me begin by asking Áine how she sees bringing together all of our various constituent groups.
Well, thank you for that question, Lucie. I think, as I've mentioned, that collaborative work is key to the Council's agenda. And I believe that, you know, in fact, today is a good example of it, right? I mean, here we are at the Girl Scout space because it's the only way that we were able to reach you visually. And we thank the Girl Scouts for giving us that moment to collaborate. But that's just one easy example of how different groups in the network can work together. As we move ahead, I think that looking at our different roles in advancing women's rights and girls' rights is really important. So as you think about collective impact, you know, one huge obstacle that sort of gets in our way is how do we all work together without tripping over each other? And how do we all work together acknowledging that there are funding challenges and that we have different priorities? And I think one of the ways in which research helps us actually in that arena is that it can not only illustrate where the problems are, but it can actually guide us in terms of the solution. Because research shows us what's wrong, but it also shows us what works. So for example, we know that we're missing from leadership positions and decision-making positions. But we also know that investing in young girls' education is one of the things that works. In fact, if we look at developing countries, we know that investments in girls' education and investments in women who are at the bottom end of the income ladder really pays off, not just in terms of women themselves and their families, but actually in terms of really empowering communities, and then also affects the national GDPs of those countries because women invest in their children and therefore invest in their companies, so everybody is better off. So I think we take issues like that and we figure out, okay, what's everybody's role in this? What's the policy role? What's the direct action role? What's the organizing role? And what is the research role? And then what is the role on the sort of corporate end, for the business end? What's the role on the media end? Where do we need to look at issues like representation of girls and young women? And we carve out a role for everybody in each of our project areas, and that's the way that we actually start to work together. Each one of us fulfills the role that we know that we can, that we want to, that's in fitting with the mission that our individual organizations have. And we link hands, really, and we move forward in that direction.
Thank you very much. Áine, with all the specious research on the internet, how do we know what to believe, and how can the Council help us?
So I think that we got a real taste of research and the difference between research and fact during the last election process or last election cycle. And you know, as social media builds and builds, I think we're going to see even more of that. Again, I think this speaks to the strength not just of the Council, but of our entire network. The fact that we have access to rigorous academic research means that we have reliable information. We are, if you will, a fact tank. We're not just a think tank. And we can make that research available to people so that you know that the data that you're working with is reliable. You know where it's coming from. You know that you're working with data from Harvard or from Memphis University, or that you're working with the University of Michigan, or that you're working with NYU or Columbia Law School, or one of the women's centers or one of the gender studies centers across the country. We have data that we pull from the West Coast, the South, the North, the East, you know, and we can also pull on data that's available globally. So we're able to pull this data together for you, and we're able to aggregate it so that you're not just looking at one report and you're not just looking at one person's work. We're looking at the data in a way that allows us to say, okay, 3 reports, 4 reports, 5 reports across different time periods with different methodologies are all pointing to the same indicators. And in that way, you know that what you have in your hands is something trustworthy, and you know it's something that you can carry into a meeting with you, be it a boardroom meeting or a meeting with your staff or a community meeting, and you can move ahead.
Thank you. How do you see the Council helping and supporting the member centers and the member centers supporting the Council? And how do you see the information flow from the member centers coming to the Council so that we can share it with everyone?
I think the really key point for me moving forward is, as I say, meeting with the different member centers to understand not just the work that you're doing, but the obstacles that you face in doing that work. I think one role that we want to look at is how we can be of help in terms of resources. You know, what does that mean, and how, you know, can we work with you in terms of technology? How do we work with you in terms of making your reports and your information accessible to the public and to the rest of our partners? I think that we need to look at issues like joint publications. How can we help in terms of making sure that there's media attention for what our member centers are doing? How do we work with social media to get attention for our network? And then how do we convene meetings with our frontline practitioners, be they corporate or community practitioners, so that they're using the most current data and research? Then I also think feeding back the information from the front lines is key to making sure that the research that's being developed is relevant and is going to be used by our partners in the community and corporate arena. For example, just this week, somebody in one of our corporate partner, one of the companies said to me that they're really looking for research that doesn't look at primary breadwinners and primary caretakers, that we need research that looks at women's dual role as both, right, where women are primary caretakers and primary breadwinners, and making sure that the type of research that we're conducting is reflecting the reality that most of us are facing these days. Now, I believe that research exists, and I believe that our members can help me access the type of information that this particular corporate partner was looking for. So it's that type of flow of information that we want to make sure that the centers are working with us on.
We have a question from who wants to know if we're going to do any work with entrepreneurs, and if we anticipate, for example, opening up our data to software and game developers so that we can make it more widely available and perhaps more fun.
So I'm a great believer in using as much technology as we have access to, and any ways that we can use technology, for example, to bring in younger women is a good move. I also think that when we talk about women's leadership, the type of leadership that we're seeing in women-owned businesses and entrepreneurs is leadership that we really want to tap into, not just in terms of the opportunities and making the business case, but also about answering that question that I asked earlier. How does women's leadership differ? And why do we, why is it that we need women's leadership to change the picture of the world right now? How is it that we can do that work together? I think we're going to find a lot of lessons and a lot of answers to those questions through women-owned businesses. So I believe that there's a huge opportunity to create a space for women-owned businesses at the Council. I believe that they're our next natural constituent, and I look forward to meeting with many and bringing them into the fold of the Council's work.
We've gotten several comments and questions about how the Council can help promote the research of others, especially of our member centers. How do you see us doing that? You've mentioned something about getting media attention. Do you have some other examples of how we might be able to help advance our member centers?
So I think that there's a number of ways in which we can do this work, and sort of even borrowing from some lessons and work that I've done in the past with other groups. I think that looking at issues collaboratively together is one of the ways to do that. So when we speak with funders, when we speak with our corporate partners, our community partners, and then with our member centers, I think we want to collectively develop the agendas so that any new research that's being produced is feeding directly into the work that others are doing or work that they're concerned with. Then, once the research is ready, there is a natural sort of portal, if you will. We don't have to create it. There will be media interest. There will be community interest. And more forums, more opportunities for groups to get together and convene and think about the type of research that needs to be produced is one of the ways that we start that work. And then more use of technology, more use of social media, and actually collaborating with each other about how we use social media is one way to promote it. So if there's a group in one of the universities on the West Coast that's twittering about a new report that they've just released, I think it's helpful if the rest of us are sending out tweets about the same report. And that's just one small, simple measure, but I think that type of collaboration in terms of the dissemination of the research as well as the production of the research will help us to create a sort of greater profile for the work overall, but in terms of individual reports and projects, it will definitely help us.
Great. One of our participants has written and says that we seem to be poised for a quantum leap in the awareness that women must be at the table. How can the Council accelerate the process And will we be fielding new research in this field as well?
I think that we will be fielding new research in this field because I really believe that our member centres have already begun that work. And I think that it is a matter of, again, developing that very strategic agenda about how we roll out existing projects and then build on those existing projects and build on the foundation that Linda mentioned at the beginning of this call about all of the great work that has already gone before. We're not starting with a clean slate here. We're starting with full folders, if you will, not quite binders, but full folders of work that we can grow from. And I think that we need to look at some of the stories that already exist in the world about women's leadership and why it matters and how it is that we can sort of grow from there. You know, for me, even coming to this point of being at the council and the opportunity to be here in New York, sitting at this table, surrounded by women leaders, is sort of a huge step when I think about the places that I've come from and the places where I've been. And it is really, it's sort of the symbolism of women's leadership that has brought me this far, and I suppose the input of women's leadership at different levels along the way. You know, I had the fortune of growing up in a country that has already elected a woman president, two in fact. And, you know, we're still, in the United States, we've still to achieve that particular benchmark. Now, I'm not going to say to you that Ireland, in fact, I needn't tell anybody, you've all seen it with your own eyes over the last few weeks. I'm not going to tell you that Ireland has sort of closed the gender gap or achieved all it needs to achieve in terms of girls' and women's rights. But I can tell you that the symbolism of having a woman president made an enormous difference for women in Ireland, particularly women of my generation who were coming of age when Mary Robinson was elected into that role. It made us think differently about opportunities. It made people look at women differently. It made our cousins and our brothers and our fathers think differently about our access to education and jobs and training. So I think that pulling on symbolism like that and really looking at how women's leadership in Fortune 500s or women's leadership in government arenas or women's leadership of community organizations can really help us to steer the sort of ship of women's rights, if you will, in a whole new direction. I also think that, you know, not to borrow a word from the last sort of political campaign, but the concept of moving forward in all directions, you know, or sort of with all feet, as it were, is something that we really need to grasp onto. Because very often when we're debating about how to move forward, we can kind of get stuck, can't we, moving around in a circle. And this concept of collaboration and working together can sometimes feel like we're joining hands in a circle. I really believe that working in collaboration means we're joining hands, but we're stepping forward while we're joining hands, so that there's sort of a mass movement of us, all working in different arenas, all working on different issues, but related. And of course, I see research as the issue that connects us all and is the piece that threads us all together. So I think that we're going to do a lot of work together. I think we're going to move forward, and I think that the member centres are going to be the powerhouse behind that movement.
Let me ask both Linda and Áine, where do you see women moving in the next 5 to 10 years?
You'd like me to go first on that? I agree with the person who posed the question about the quantum leap that women seem poised to take, because women are moving forward in so many arenas. Our research has shown that they own the majority, they're increasingly owning the majority of investment wealth in the world. They control consumer spending. Look at women in the past U.S. election, how important an ingredient they were. So women are feeling their own. There are also a number of organizations out there working for women, like Vision 2020, like the 30% Coalition, and these are all organizations that the Council works with closely. So I actually see within the next 5 to 10 years women achieving at least a critical mass in a number of key arenas. And we have seen that. Certainly we see the movement very strongly in higher education. And I think in the corporate arena as well, we see a whole layer there, poised to take hold within the next 5 to 10 years. So I myself am very optimistic about where we're going to see women and girls. And I would just like to add something. I think that the convening role of the Council is so important. I think having our member centers in the network, but having our corporate circle, having our president's circle of college and university leaders, we have an enormous convening role to play of bringing these various pieces together. And we've also done so much working across generations that I think that many of the critical ingredients for bringing about the kind of changes we're talking about are there within our broad net. And so I'm looking forward to hearing and seeing great things from you, Áine, under your leadership, and Lucie, your leadership of the board. And I'm very pleased myself that I will continue to be President Emerita, so I will have a link to the Council as well. So,
and I agree. You know, I think that the way forward and what we can do over the next 5 to 10 years is achieve that balance. I think we need to set that bold goal. You know, we definitely celebrated when women gained 20% of the Senate this time around, this last election. But I think that we need to be guided by our share of the population. And I think that we need to see equality and equal representation as reflecting our segment of the population. So if we comprise almost 51% of the population, then we should see having 51% of decision-making seats, as it were, be it in business or in the community or in the government, then we should see that as our goal. And I think it's achievable. I think the work that we all do together means we just need a final push. I think we're very much poised to take that final push.
I would just add something else here, if I could, that I also think it's really important for us to work increasingly in partnership with men, and I think we have certainly started to do that at the Council, and a number of organizations are seeing that as a very important goal as well.
Thank you. Well, I couldn't be more excited about where I see the Council going. I think as Linda talks about our convenings and as Áine talks about a goal of 51%, or our share of the population of women taking their due place in leadership, are bold and audacious goals, but I think it makes sense. And I hope that the Council will be able to bring everyone together under our tent, because what I see out there is a lot of women's organizations, all of us struggling all the time for resources, and I think working together we will be able to be far stronger, far more strategic in how we go about accomplishing what we need to do, women and men together. But it's now time for research to guide us in the way we take our place in this world. So I would like to thank all of you for joining us. I hope you will support Linda's future development. She's moving on to Harvard for the next year with a fellowship, and she will stay engaged with us, and we're very excited about that. And to be extremely supportive of Áine, we welcome all of you to invite her to come see you and meet you, and anyone who wishes to host events, she would be delighted to join you as she wants to get to know you. I want to thank the Girl Scouts again for hosting us today. We do appreciate that, and I would be remiss if I didn't thank the staff for working long and hard to get this together, and for having a wonderfully supportive board which has worked through this whole process. And we are hoping you will watch the Council as it moves through a really model transition from one leader to the next leader, and that this will be a seamless process where we will not have any hiccups, but instead we'll move from one great set of accomplishments, and we will catapult to the next set of accomplishments and the next level of achievement. So thank you, and I hope you have all have a good evening.
And I would just like to thank all of you for your support over the past 16 years and encourage you to continue that support. We have a terrific new leader here. I'm so pleased. Thank you.
Thank you.